All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first webinar of the Cybersecurity Framework series as we talk about identity security and protection. My name is George Abusamra, and today we'll be talking about what you need to know to protect your digital identities. All right, during today's session, we'll be talking about identity security and protecting your corporate and your personal digital identities. To start, I'll be providing you with a quick introduction to identity security. Then we'll talk about some tips on how to protect your identities. We'll then go through a quick demo of what hackers can do to capture your credentials and how you can protect against it. And finally, we'll go through a Q&A session to answer any questions that you might have. We'll also be monitoring the chat window for any questions that pop up throughout the presentation. All right. So traditionally, the perimeter of your organization would have been the network. Everything that you wanted to protect was behind your firewalls. All your endpoints, your on-site users, your servers, your applications, so on and so forth. Now, as organizations begin to operate in a more modern fashion, such as introducing a hybrid cloud, where you still have your traditional on-premises network, as well as a footprint into the public or private cloud. Now, when you start introducing or allowing personal devices to be used for business purposes, when you have external vendors and contractors doing work for you, when mobile devices came into play as a tool to conduct business on, applications are becoming more cloud-based and using software as a service instead of setting up servers and an infrastructure. And finally, when your employees are working remote. Your perimeter is no longer your local network or your firewall. Your perimeter now becomes your identities. This is one of the main reasons why you want to protect your identities at all times. It's essentially the keys to the kingdom when an organization puts its foot into the cloud. Now, in the Microsoft world, there are plenty of tools and services that an organization can use to protect your identities. Now, these are just some of the features or tools that you can configure in the Microsoft world to protect those identities. Multi-factor authentication is a common one. Conditional access policies, risk behavior, risky users, single sign-on, Azure Sentinel. All these features here are somewhat integrated with your identity and identity protection in the Microsoft world. We'll be covering a couple of these later on in the demo, but we can definitely have further conversations around these at a later time. Now, how can we protect your digital identities? We're going to be providing you with some tips on how to do so. First and foremost, multi-factor authentication for corporate as well as personal accounts. Now, multi-factor authentication means that in order to either log in or to confirm a transaction, you'll need to use two factors to authenticate yourself, preferably a combination of something which is a password, a PIN code, or a passphrase, something you have, such as a physical token like your mobile device, or something you are, like a fingerprint or face recognition, for example, something with biometrics. This feature will always be on top of every security list I make because MFA blocks 99.9% of attacks against your identity. It's proven that MFA works and it keeps bad actors out. I also want to stress on the fact that you should also protect any personal account you have with MFA and not just your corporate account, especially if you use the same credentials across these platforms. Hackers can attack your personal account and try to gain access to your corporate account if you use that same password. Use a password manager. Now, a password manager tool is a great way to protect your digital identities. Passwords are one of the biggest problems when it comes to protecting your digital ID. If your primary email gets compromised and you use the same password across other websites or applications, an attacker has accessed the gateway to your online identity. Once you are compromised, they can reset passwords and cause serious damage to your life and potentially your finances. So a password manager can help you create, store, and manage complex and unique passwords for every new service that you need. Also, make sure to choose a password manager that supports MFA. You don't want your password manager to be hacked. Next tip here is use passphrases and not passwords. So linked to the use of a password management tool, It's also important to create passwords that are as strong as possible. Any of the password management tools can auto-generate unique, strong passwords per site. But if you want to continue creating your own passwords, there are a few things that you want to think about. First is you want to use a passphrase and not a password. One common recommended method is to take 4 words that aren't really associated together and combine them together. For example, white wall, big screen. It's not complex. It's just long enough made with 4 words that are not really associated together. And it'll be kind of difficult or impossible to find within a dictionary tag where someone can just brute force that password. Your passphrases should be at least 8 characters long, but try to aim for 12 to 16 for additional security. The longer the better. Unless it's a phishing attack, then the length of the password doesn't really matter. We're just providing the hackers or the cyber criminals with your passwords. Never use personal information in your passwords or passphrases. Personal information like your birthday, anniversary, or name of your children, for example, because all those could be publicly known or could be publicly exported from your social media accounts. Don't use the same passphrase for everything. If you choose not to use a password manager, this will mean creating a unique passphrase for every site and application that you log into. Always check the fine print before signing up to services. Now, when was the last time you downloaded a new app or signed up for something new using your email address? We all sign up for things on what feels like a weekly basis, and we always get that little notification about what permissions you are granting to that particular app or service. But how many of us actually take the time to read that small fine print and really look at what permissions we are giving that app or service? Social media apps are notorious for tracking your behavior and for accessing your list of contacts when there may be no real reason to do so. So make sure you check the fine print and think about what you're allowing before signing up, especially if you're using your corporate account. Hackers have been requesting access to read and send emails on your behalf. So if you don't read the fine print, hackers can take over your email account and start sending out emails pretending to be you. And that could lead their way into the company eventually. Avoid public Wi-Fi networks. Now, public Wi-Fis are notorious for cybercrime and presents a serious security threat to anyone who uses a public Wi-Fi hotspot. Airports, hotels, cafes, and restaurants are just some of the few that we can name right now, but you want to avoid their Wi-Fi networks at all costs. If it's absolutely necessary for you to use a public Wi-Fi connection, use a VPN, and ideally a paid version of one of the leading VPNs. ExpressVPN is one of them, and NordVPN is another one. Don't overshare personal information. Be careful what personal data you put and where. There are lots of social media posts that look harmless to the naked eye, but could pose a huge security risk for an organization. Have you ever seen those social media name game posts, like this one, for example? Your superhero name is your favorite teacher's name, followed by the make of your car. Now, by answering this question, you already gave up 2 pieces of information that people need to reset the password or hack your account. Keep that in mind the next time you see posts similar to this. A lot of times, when you want to reset your password or change your password, you can answer a couple of questions. If you answer those correctly, then you're able to reset that password. So just make sure when you see posts like this, do not provide any personal information and do not overshare. Always take an extra second before you click or post. Now, one of the most common phishing scams comes from cyber criminals impersonating services that you sign up for, such as Netflix, Amazon, PayPal, the list goes on and on. They will try and lure you by emailing that there's an issue with your payment or with your account. So be sure to check the from field and ensure it's actually from the company and not a scammer trying to gain access to your personal information. Always take that extra second to verify why the service is asking me for my credentials and whether it originated from the actual source. If you have 1% doubt, always reach out to the company over the telephone to validate. Get the phone number of the company you're contacting from a public search engine rather than in an email signature, because if it's a spam or a phishing email that came through, they also would change that phone number in the email signature. Use single sign-on platforms for all business apps. Now in 2020, a massive 80% of breaches were related to weak or stolen credentials. What's alarming is that the fact that many working professionals use the same password for business and personal use as well. So having SSO allows all staff to access all their necessary business apps with just one login. Aside from boosting productivity by reducing the time it takes for users to switch between one app and the other, policies can also be applied to those third-party applications. So Microsoft's conditional access policies, for example, can be used to enable location-based restrictions or device restrictions to those applications, meaning you can block access to QuickBooks, for example, which is a third-party app, from outside your home country, or lock it down to specific IPs and devices into your company. Implement access policies. Now, the majority of attacks happen from outside your home country. For organizations in Canada, the majority of attacks come from Russia, China, Nigeria, Bulgaria, South Africa, just to name a few. Now, location-based conditional access policies can be implemented to block access to your environment from countries where you don't conduct business, thus reducing your attack exposure. Use delegated access following the least privileged method, meaning only provide access to exactly what needs to be done. You don't need to be a domain administrator to domain join a device, for example, or to create users. Other lower privilege accounts or privileges are adequate to perform these tasks without over-permissioning an account. And last but not least, train your employees about digital security. Threats are always evolving. They get more sophisticated every single day. And with the rise in cybercrime, even with the most expensive security tools you've invested in, it's not enough. The users are considered the weakest link. The security of your company relies on a sound digital infrastructure and an IT team that can support it. However, it is an organization's end users that tend to make or break security efforts. This is why security awareness for your end users must become a company priority. All right, now for the live demo, I'm going to show you what hackers do to steal your identities or your credentials, and how can social media or your personal accounts affect your corporate or business accounts. Then I'll show you some of the identity protection features that Microsoft has to offer. All right, so let's start off by using this tool here. All right, so first things first, hackers need to understand your email convention or your email pattern. Let's just say we're going to search for ProServeIT.com in this case. So our email pattern in this case, based on the sample that it was able to generate or capture, is first initial, last name. So you can see here S Bakersville for Stephanie Bakersville, G Abu Samra, so on and so forth. So based on the public information that we have out there, it was able to detect that our first initial, last name at ProServeIT.com is our naming convention for our emails. That is crucial for a hacker to know if they are gonna mass send a phishing email to everybody. At least they'll have their naming convention for their emails. Now that we have this naming convention, we're going to use a tool that scans your social media account, mainly LinkedIn in this case, and it's going to capture all employees under the ProServeIT group or company in LinkedIn. And it's also going to create first initial, last name at ProServeIT.com in a word list so that the hackers can use if they want to mass email people. So we've captured the naming convention for their emails. Now we're using the servers to scan for LinkedIn. Should take another 5 to 10 seconds or so. And then it would populate all the results on the screen, as well as save a text file with all the users that was able to capture and create an email for each one of these. So we can see here, Eric Sugar is the president, Karen Bradley, director of software development, so on and so forth. And now if we take a look at the ProServeIT.txt file that was created, it already created eSugar at ProServeIT.com, K Bradley at ProServeIT.com, so on and so forth. So now the hacker has, the majority of the emails, whoever has signed up for LinkedIn at least, and their naming convention. It's already created. Now all they have to do is just mass email a phishing link and hope for someone to click on it and get compromised. Now, let's say that, it found George, myself, being part of that company. And I'm going to run another tool just to see my full name, what social media accounts are associated with that full name. So give this a couple of seconds. Now, I do apologize. This service was not working earlier this morning, and then it worked again. And we'll just give it a try just to see if it's going to work or not. But basically what it's going to do, it's going to scan, the majority, if not all, of social media platforms and try to find out where this username exists. Do they have Facebook? Do they have LinkedIn? Do they have Instagram? Do they have GitHub? Whatever social media platforms out there, it's going to check for this username and then provide us with a link or URL pointing to this name. Now, for the sake of this demo, let's just say this account does have Facebook on it. All right, we'll just keep this open just in case it does populate. But let's just say, George Abu Samra has Facebook amongst other various social media platforms. So what we're going to do in this case is we're going to send a phishing link to George, knowing that he has Facebook. Just as an example, but this can definitely be used for other platforms as well. So in this case, I'm going to create a Facebook phishing page, just a standard phishing page. I don't want any keyloggers in this case. Go to facebook.com. All right, so now that we've generated our phishing link, let's go ahead and run it. All right, and as you can see, you can take a look at the link up here. It's not facebook.com. It's the link that we had generated. And I'm just going to type in here just a random email address and a password. And I'm just going to make it extremely long so you can see that it really doesn't matter how long your password is. A phishing attack would always compromise your password. So now that I clicked logged in, it redirected me to facebook.com, which is the real site. That's what I want it to do. And now if we take a look at our platform here, at our application, you can see credentials found, victim@domain.com, and this is the long password that I chose to put. So it literally took us a few seconds to set this up, to generate a phishing link, send that email out, have them click on it, and then we eventually get their credentials. Now, a lot of times, these same credentials that you use on Facebook or on Instagram or any other social media platform is probably the exact same that you use for your corporate accounts. So we want to make sure that that does not happen. You want to switch your account, use passphrases, don't use passwords or the same password across these different platforms. All right, this finally ran, and you can see at least my name has signed up for all these services here, even though they might not be me. But I do know another George Abu Samra back home in Lebanon, but eventually, these links, some of them belong to me, some of them don't belong to me. So it's just a matter of who you're attacking, who the attacker is, who's the victim of the attacker. They can easily find out all their social media, create a phishing link for all the social media platforms that they have, possibly put in the email something along the lines of, hey, your account is inactive or has been inactive for quite some time. Click here to activate it. And then as they type in their credentials, the hacker now has those credentials. So you want to make sure that you are protected even on your personal account as well. All right. Now, one thing I want to show you is, let's just say we did compromise that password. In this case, instead of it being George, we're going to use our demo tenant, and we're going to use Alex Wilbur as an example. And I just want to show you the importance of MFA. So I just typed in this person's password that I just hacked or captured, for example. I'm going to dump information from the tenant, which should take, roughly 10 seconds, 11 seconds or so, depending on the size of the organization. But in this case, it took around 13 seconds to set up. Now, I'm going to run this command to set up a local web server so I can see the results locally. Now, keep in mind, this user that I'm working with is not an admin whatsoever. So just a regular user account, and you can see the amount of information you can capture if that user does not have MFA turned on. Click on users, you can see all the users in the environment, in the tenant, whether they're active, what their UPN is, their email address, departments, the last password change timestamp, which is crucial for cyber criminals to know, their job titles, mobile device phone numbers, so on and so forth. You can also figure out who's part of what group. So let's just say the finance team. These are the people that are part of the finance team. If they're after this company's money, they might want to attack these people. You can even see directory roles. Who are admins in your environment? Christie is an exchange admin. All these users are global admins. Pradeep is a billing administrator. Maybe we want to attack Pradeep to get, some sort of access to the company's financials. And there's a whole lot of information that you can capture just by a regular user account with no admin privileges. So you can imagine what would happen if someone did have admin privileges. All right, so with that said, how can we protect ourselves against these types of attacks? For one, let's take a look at conditional access policies. Now, since I'm signing in from Canada right now, I have created a policy that allows me to only sign in from Canada. But I'm just going to turn on my VPN here to change my IP and give me an IP in the Netherlands or Amsterdam. There it is, IP has changed. Now, if I want to sign into portal.office.com using my corporate account, all right, let's log in with Adele V. All right, we're going to be greeted with this message. You cannot access this right now. Your sign-in was successful, but does not meet the criteria to access this resource. For example, you might be signing in from a browser, app, or location that is restricted by your admin. So we did indeed restrict the location to only Canada. So the attacker doesn't know that. They don't know whether we have a restriction on the browser, on the application, the location. They won't know. But all they know is that they have the proper password, the real password, but they were not able to sign into your account because of some sort of restriction that we have in the backend. If you click on more details, you can see that this is logging into the Office 365 suite using this public IP address that we just generated from the Netherlands. All right, so let's turn that off. And let us show you why single sign-on applications or integrating single sign-on with your Azure AD environment is crucial. So we're going to sign in here with Megan B. All right, so we're going to sign into myapps.microsoft.com, where all the deployed applications in your Azure AD tenant have been deployed. In this case, I set up an application called Freshdesk, and I configured single sign-on with this Azure or this Office 365 environment, this Azure AD environment, which requires me to no longer sign into this application on my own. As long as I'm signed into my Microsoft account, which is governed by all the security controls, MFA, conditional access policies, location-based policies, device restrictions, everything can be applied to this application itself. And now I'm able to sign in. This is Megan, without having to type my credentials or sign in, as long as I'm signed into my corporate Microsoft account. Now, just as a quick demo, I'm going to sign out and try to sign back in. All right, it's not signed in here. You can see I have to click login. And I don't even have to type in my password. Just click login. Now, each service is going to look a little different. For this service, this is what it looks like. And I'm going to sign in with single sign-on. So I haven't typed in my email or my password for this service. It's automatically going to sign me in to Megan's account because I'm already signed into my corporate Microsoft account. And we'll get access to the Freshdesk environment. All right, and one final demo here is risky sign-in and risky behaviors. So I'm logging in now from a Tor browser, which is an anonymizer browser or a VPN type browser. It's used to connect to the dark web, for example, and this is considered not safe in Microsoft's world. So what I've configured in the backend is something called risky sign-ins. If, as I'm signing in or as the user is signing in, Microsoft detects that this is a low, medium, or high risky sign-in, it's automatically going to take action depending on what we set for it in the backend. So in this case, I have it set to block, meaning that there it is, your account is blocked. We've detected suspicious activity on your account. So it's not even going to allow me in, even if the hacker has the password and Microsoft detects some sort of vulnerability or some sort of threat level based on your live sign-in activity. Now, this could be linked, a malware linked IP that you are signing in from. That IP has a high confidence level that's been used for malicious purposes in the past. It would also count against this. If you're using a VPN or the Tor network to sign in, that's also considered risky to Microsoft, unless someone's monitoring it in the back end and then they can release you from the blocked list. So it really depends on your actions and how you're working, your behavior from a day-to-day perspective. Do you usually sign in from Canada and then suddenly you sign in from Nigeria, for example? That is a risky behavior. So it would at least block your account or require you to MFA yourself before you can sign in. So these are just some of the ways that you can mitigate these types of attacks. All right, let's go back to the presentation here. So one thing that you have to keep in mind is that anybody could be a victim of cybercrime. It's a matter of when they get hit and not if they get hit. And we're seeing a lot of both targeted and non-targeted attacks. So it doesn't really matter what your business is or how many employees you have. If you have an exposed vulnerability, it will be used and abused. Now, ProServe has an offering that's built around a product called Azure Sentinel, called Alarm Guardian. Now, you can think about this offering as getting security for your home, but instead of protecting your home, we'll be protecting your IT environment from bad actors, such as Office 365, your Azure, servers, workstations, firewalls, so on and so forth. So by signing up to Alarm Guardian, we would be able to keep an eye on your environment from security risks 24/7. There are different tiers that you can choose from. Just it depends on your organization and what you want us to monitor. So if you're interested in exploring this offer further, reach out to us at cloud@ProServeIT.com and mention this identity protection webinar to get more information about our Azure Sentinel deployment. Now, one more thing here, there's a security workshop with an optional Sentinel module that can be provided by Microsoft. This could be a funded workshop for your organization. So reach out to us at cloud@ProServeIT.com to see if you qualify for this funded workshop. mainly what this entails of is identifying threats in your environment, trying to capture whether someone has been compromised or maybe has been compromised in the past, any threats around your email, your identity, your data, your applications, and provide you with a report with all our findings at the end of the workshop. So if you're interested in this, reach out to us at cloud@ProServeIT.com, and we'll make sure to check for you whether you qualify for this offer or how else we can help you set this up. Right, and now for some Q&A. I apologize, I do realize that we're 1 minute over. So if you do have any questions, please jot them down and stay on the line. Otherwise, we'll be glad to answer them for you via email. So just send us an email to cloud@ProServeIT.com and we'll make sure to get back to you as soon as possible.
And George, we do have a question from Lisa, if we have a chance. Where exactly do you set MS Admin Center to block risky sign-ins?
All right, so it would be over here. So once you log into your Azure AD environment, it's under Identity Protection, Security, Identity Protection. And now you have User Risk Policy and Sign-in Risk Policy that you want to take a look at. So by clicking Sign-in Risk Policy, just for the sake of this demo, I have included Alex Wilbur, just like I showed you. I want the risk to be low and above. Any type of risk associated with this person's sign-in, I want it to be captured and be considered risky. And then the level of access, I'm allowing access, but they have to MFA themselves to make sure they are who they say they are. Or you can just entirely block access and have the IT admins release that user from the blocked list. And you can also take a look at the risky sign-ins report to see how are these sign-ins happening, where they're happening from, which users are affected. And then you can see all this, Alex Wilbur stuff happening from the Netherlands, Germany, just based on the demos that I've been setting up and testing. And I just want to remind everyone that this does require an Azure AD Premium 2 license. So, make sure you have that if you want to set this up. Otherwise, reach out to us and we will be glad to help you get that sorted out as well.
I think that was the only question we had, George.
Okay.
Lisa does say thank you. That's very helpful.
No problem.
So glad we could get that answered for you, Lisa. I know that I mentioned on the chat that we might not be able to, but I'm glad we were able to. Yeah, and I think that's going to probably do it for us today. Just there are no other questions at this time. So I'm going to say if you do have further questions, again, cloud@ProServeIT.com is the email to reach out to us at, and we're definitely going to be happy to answer that. Yeah, George, thanks for putting that on the screen there. Yep, cloud@ProServeIT.com if you have any other further questions. Otherwise, folks, I did want to say a friendly reminder. This is the first webinar in our cybersecurity framework webinar series. So if you'd like to join us for our second webinar, which will be happening September 29th at 2 p.m., I did put a link to the sign up page there as well. You can definitely join us then as well. We'd love to see you then too. So thanks so much, folks, and enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll hopefully see you September 29th. Talk to you later.
All right. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.